The bamboo lounge scene in Goodfellas isn't just another movie moment. It's like getting a backstage pass to the world of organized crime in New York. Picture this. A camera glides smoothly through the lounge as Ray Liotta's Henry Hill introduces us to a cast of characters who seem larger than life, but were actually very real people. Each name dropped, each face shown, tells a story of loyalty, violence, and ultimately the harsh reality of life in the mob. Think of the bamboo lounge as the crew's unofficial office. Sure, on the surface it looks like any other hangout spot, but beneath that casual atmosphere lies a world of tension and danger. When Henry introduces these guys, he does it so casually, like he's showing you around at a family barbecue. But make no mistake, these weren't just some friends getting together for drinks. These were men deeply involved in a complex criminal world. Let's start with Anthony Stabile. On the surface, he might seem like just another guy at the table, but Stabile was actually a heavy hitter in the Gambino crime family and one of Paul Vario's trusted associates. Here's an ironic twist of fate. Stabile was actually supposed to kill Henry during a mission in Florida, but Henry's decision to enter the witness protection program threw a wrench in those plans. Stabile himself wasn't so lucky. He met his end in 1985, reminding us just how quickly fortunes could change in their world. Then there's Frank Carbone. You might remember him as the guy who ends up frozen in a meat truck. Not exactly a pleasant way to go. The real story behind Carbone is even more fascinating. He was based on Angelo Sepe, one of Jimmy Burke's crew members who played a major role in the infamous Lufthansa heist. But here's where Hollywood and reality split paths. In the movie, Carbone dies on Burke's orders, but the real Sepe met his end for a different reason. He made the fatal mistake of robbing a Lucchese-connected drug dealer of both cocaine and cash. In their world, that kind of move was essentially signing your own death warrant. Now let's talk about Mo Black's brother, Fat Andy, and this is where things get really interesting. Fat Andy was based on Anthony Fat Andy Ruggiano, a significant player in the Gambino family. But what makes this character particularly fascinating isn't just his mob connections, it's the absolutely wild story behind them. Fat Andy wasn't just another mobster, he was a guy who literally grew up in the life. His father, also named Anthony Ruggiano, was a made man in the Gambino family. Talk about following in your dad's footsteps. But here's where it gets really crazy. Fat Andy's son, Anthony Ruggiano Jr., ended up becoming an informant for the FBI. Can you imagine the family dinners in that household? But the most shocking part of Fat Andy's story? It's got to be the murder of his own nephew, Salvatore Ruggiano. Yeah, you read that right, his nephew. Fat Andy lured his own flesh and blood to a social club in Brooklyn and had him whacked. If that doesn't show you how ruthless this world could be, I don't know what will. But wait, it gets even crazier when you look at who played Fat Andy in the film. Louis Ippolito, an actual NYPD detective who had deep connections to both the Lucchese and Gambino families. Talk about art imitating life, or maybe it was the other way around. They called him the Mafia Cop, and his real-life story is so wild it could be its own movie. Ippolito wasn't just dabbling in some petty corruption. This guy was neck-deep in it. We're talking about an NYPD detective who was literally moonlighting as a hitman for the mob. Ippolito, along with his partner Stephen Caracappa, was responsible for at least 8 murders while they were supposed to be upholding the law. These weren't just random hits either. We're talking about cold-blooded executions carried out on the orders of Anthony Gaspipe Casso, the underboss of the Lucchese crime family. The sheer brutality and betrayal of their actions is almost beyond comprehension. Moving down the line, we've got Frankie the Wop. Based on Frankie Manzano, think of him as one of those behind-the-scenes guys who keeps the machine running. As a soldier in the Lucchese family, Monzo wasn't the type to make headlines, but he was crucial to the operation. Sometimes the quietest guys in the room are the ones you really need to watch out for. Then there's Freddie No-Nose. Yeah, you can probably guess there's a story behind that name. Based on Ferdinand de Lucia, who was actually more commonly known as Freddie Red by his friends, a nickname he earned for all the blood he spilled as a top enforcer for the Profaci family. His No-Nose nickname came from having a smashed boxer's nose and a connecting hair lip. One of the most shocking aspects of his story was his mysterious disappearance in 1969, along with his associate Sally D'Ambrosio. They were reportedly slaughtered, dismembered, and buried as to never be found. The prevailing theory was that boss Joe Colombo ordered their execution because he feared they were planning a palace coup. Colombo even had to disavow knowledge of their disappearance to the family membership because they were so popular within the organization. As for Pete the Killer, Not exactly the kind of nickname you want to bring up at dinner parties. Pete was based on Peter Abenanti. Interestingly, his menacing nickname came not from violence, but from his sharp dressing style. While he was known for his fashion sense, he was still deeply involved in criminal activities. One of the most chilling aspects of his story involves his role in the death of Tommy DeSimone. He was present at Gefkin's bar in 1979, congratulating DeSimone on what was supposed to be his upcoming induction in the Lucchese crime family. However, this celebration was actually a ruse, and DeSimone was led to his death later that night. Pete the Killer remained active in the criminal world well into his 70s, running a loan sharking operation in Howard Beach until near the end of his life. Nicky Eyes is another interesting character, likely based on Nicholas Marangelo, a guy who collected nicknames like some people collect baseball cards. Nicky Glasses, Nicky Cigars, Little Nicky, Nicky the Butler, he had them all. As underboss of the Bonanno family, he was kind of a guy who preferred pulling strings from behind the curtain rather than taking center stage. Here's a wild one. Michael Franzese. His brief mention in Goodfellas almost landed him in hot water in real life. Imagine being a former mobster trying to lay low and suddenly your name pops up in one of the biggest mob movies ever made. Talk about uncomfortable. Franzise's story is pretty remarkable. He went from being a capo regime in the Colombo family to becoming a born-again Christian and motivational speaker. He's also gained considerable fame on YouTube, where he shares insights about his past and life lessons learned along the way. And let's not forget about Jimmy Two Times. You know, the guy who says everything twice? Gonna go get the papers. Get the papers. Based on Johnny Echoes Campopiano, who had a genuine speech impediment. He adds a touch of unintentional humor to what's otherwise a pretty intense lineup. What makes the Bamboo Lounge scene captivating is how it captures a moment in time that's now gone. Which of these guys would you like me to discuss in another video? Let me know in the comments and we'll dive deeper into the character that catches your interest the most so we can explore their story together.